All right, it's Jamie Smart here, and welcome to Sales and Marketing for Coaches That Hate Sales and Marketing. And it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek title, but this webinar is going to be relevant to you whether you're a coach, a trainer, a consultant, a therapist, or just someone who has gifts that you want to give to the world, but you've kind of maybe got a bit stuck in the sales and marketing process or understanding where to get started or what that looks like. Or maybe you're not stuck at all, but you just want to take things to another level. And I'm really pleased that I'm joined by my guest, Mamoon Yousaf, here today. And
hi, everyone.
Welcome, Mamoon. I thought I'd just take a minute, and it's really interesting. So Mamoon is a very, very experienced coach, particularly who focuses on helping coaches develop their sales and marketing process. And one of the interesting things about Mamoon is that he and I met because I actually enrolled him as a client. He reached out and expressed some interest in a program that I was running, one of my retreats, and we just had a great conversation and really connected. And I answered the questions he had, and then he signed up on the retreat. But as I got to know Mamoon better, I realized that he was just awesome at helping people with this whole domain of sales and marketing. So a couple of things happened. One of the things that happened was he hired me to he wanted to do an apprentice program with me. And then as we got to know each other better, I said, hey, I'd love to have you teach people on some of the programs that I'm running, teach them how to develop their business. Because as you may or may not know, over the last few years, I've been deepening my understanding of the inside-out nature of reality, the principles behind innate thinking. And so one of the things I'm really fascinated about in this call is to explore with Mamoon how those principles play out in the domain of sales and marketing. So welcome, Mamoon.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. It's
you're so welcome.
It's a great honor. It is a great honor to be talking with you and to be able to share some ideas with everyone here. And really excited about today's call.
Well, and I guess I'd love to start by asking you, what first sparked your interest in the whole domain of sales and marketing? What's your story with it?
Yeah, so here's what happened. I wanted to be a coach since I hired my first coach in 2004, 2005, right? So I hired a coach. I got some Tony Robbins program and it said, oh, you could hire a coach. And I was like, oh, what the heck is a coach? Okay, let's see what that's about. So I called up the company and I hired a coach. And that coach helped me make some really big decisions that I needed to make. I was in quite a rough spot in life and I just needed to speak with somebody who could give me a very clear, objective, you're losing your mind right now, or, you can do whatever you want in life, just go for it kind of thing. So I made some big decisions. I left a career in medicine. I got married really young. I moved country. I did all these big, crazy things with the help of a coach. And so I was like, wow, coaching, could be really powerful. What I really thought is, that dude has a cool job. Because all that guy did was talk to me over the phone for a bit and completely changed my life. So that's where my interest in coaching sparked from. And then sales and marketing, like probably with most coaches, was just something I had no interest in whatsoever until I set up my website. So I did an NLP course, and then I set up a website saying I was a coach, expecting my phone to just ring off the hook with potential clients going, oh my gosh, Mamoon, you're a coach? Can I hire you right now, please? And to my shock and surprise, that didn't happen. So I started to look on the internet and just about anywhere and everywhere I possibly could for anything that might give me some freaking clue as to why and how anybody hires a coach. And my first thought was, well, how did I hire the Tony Robbins coach? Oh, okay, so I need to be on television then and get people to buy a product. So I went through this whole thought process that didn't make, it was completely grounded in not having a clue about sales and marketing. really? And then eventually I came across a guy who's now a very good friend of mine, called Christian Michelson, who I hired to mentor me and coach me and teach me a lot of what I now know about sales and marketing. And he really showed me a lot of really cool things, including what marketing is, how to sell coaching versus other stuff, and all of that kind of thing. So that's where I got into it. And I still wasn't really that into it until I realized that here's what's interesting, Jamie, because we had a conversation about this before, but basically I must have had some level of grounding, because I got one of those programs on how to get coaching clients, and then I got loads of coaching clients right away, right? And that sparked my interest, because then I was like, well, okay, there's probably a whole bunch of other stuff. I can probably deepen my knowledge of sales and marketing, which I did. And then my business just grew and grew over the next few years in the middle of the biggest economic crisis in the history of humanity, as the news would let you believe, right? So that's where I got really into sales and marketing, was just seeing that it had a big effect on me. Because what really did it for me wasn't that I got clients, but what really did it for me was seeing my clients' lives change through the coaching that I was giving them, and then seeing that, wow, that probably wouldn't have happened if I didn't first learn about sales and marketing.
Well, that really makes sense to me, Mamoon. And there's something you said, I really want to dive into it. You said, as we discussed previously, you must have had some grounding, because you basically got a how-to program and put it into action. And if I remember correctly, within like 30 days, you got a whole bunch of clients and were doing very, very well.
Yeah.
The fact is, I know there's going to be a bunch of people listening to this who have gone and bought how-to programs, and they haven't been able to put it into action. So from your perspective, what do you mean by grounding? Well, you said you had grounding because you were able to implement that. What do you mean by grounding?
Yeah, well, here's what's funny. You see, at that point in time, I had no idea about the inside-out nature of reality. I mean, that was just no idea that existed, right? So I didn't know about the inside-out nature of reality. And yet, maybe because there was just something that was like, okay, it was a very simple formula. It was like, get people to have introductory sessions with you, and then do them well, and people sign up. And then you have coaching clients. And so a very simple thing. So a lot of people, what they would do is they would get the program that taught, and then they wouldn't either get the introductory sessions, or they wouldn't, copy and paste the emails to send out. I don't know. Like, for me, it just didn't make any sense to not take action on absolutely everything that I possibly could. So the first thing I did is I went out and I found people. I just looked at everybody in my Facebook anybody who might even vaguely consider themselves a friend or anything, right? And I was like, I just approached them one by one saying, hey, I'm doing this coaching thing. Would you mind sending out this email for me? And that was basically all I did. Now, it turns out most people don't do that, right? So most people won't just go all out, guns a-blazing.
Yeah, and I've seen that again and again and again. And I have my own theories about why that is. And one of the reasons I think it is, I think a lot of times people actually they're feeling insecure about their ability to deliver the goods when it comes to the coaching. So it looks like a sales and marketing problem or a not taking action problem, but it's actually often a manifestation of not believing enough in yourself, or not having the confidence in your own ability to go out there and make something happen. Now, there's a real catch-22 built into that, because the way a person develops their skills and builds their experience and deepens their understanding as a coach or a trainer or a consultant is by working with people. But if you're waiting until you know enough before you start working with people, well, how are you going to develop that experience, deepen your understanding, see how what you're learning plays out when you're working with others? So it often looks like an action problem, but I think it's actually often what I'd call a grounding problem in the sky.
Yeah.
But what's your take?
Something just to go, which is, in Zen Buddhism, they talk about the beginner's mind. And when I got the how-to program and just did it, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. So I would just do everything that was suggested in the program, just anything that seemed like a good idea, I would just try it out. Because I was like, well, if it doesn't work, I'll give it back within 30 days. I was very, very serious about it. In fact, I probably waited until I signed up like 5 or 6 clients before the balance between giving back the program that was free for 30 days or not kind of tipped into, okay, now you would just be an absolute git if you gave it back, right? So there was something about that was just like, well, I'm only, because, it's like, well, only if I have tons of clients, then, it was kind of like a win-win scenario for me. And I just had this beginner's mind of like, well, I'm going to go, I'm going to take action. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, I don't lose anything.
Now, one of the things people often say, well, there are a couple. One is fear of rejection, fear of criticism. The other is I don't know where to start. Now, one of the things you talked about on the announcement page for this webinar is the simple mindset shift that lets you start to love marketing yourself and your business, even if the thought of that made you cringe until now.
Yeah.
What is that shift? And does it deal with those things of I don't know how, or I don't know where to start, or I'm afraid of rejection? Do it deal with those things?
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. Because here's my experience, because I've worked with a lot of coaches now. I've probably spoken with hundreds of coaches and, interviewed hundreds of coaches and worked with a lot of coaches. And here's what coaches tend to love is coaching. And people who know the inside out paradigm tend to love the inside out paradigm. And a lot of coaches tend to hate sales and marketing, but they love coaching. So the big thing that shifted for me, that basically I've noticed that when it shifts for clients, it just throws out a ton of insecure thinking, is what if your marketing is coaching? What if marketing is coaching? Some of the things that you do during coaching are exactly the same things you're meant to do if you're doing really good marketing. Before I go on a rant, is it cool if I share this? Just some random ideas about. You think people might like to hear about this?
Go for it.
Okay. So some of the things that you do are the exact right things to do in your marketing. When I'm coaching people, it's a default for me to let the person that I'm speaking with see their own potential, which usually they have a bunch of thought in the way that's blocking them from seeing. And one of the best possible things you can do if you're marketing something is letting people see their potential. That's why the programs are called, lose 100 pounds of weight or get 50 clients in 5 minutes, right? Well, if those claims are bogus, then it's no good. But if they're real because people have done it or the creator of the program has done it, which is usually the case, what the story on the sales page or just that story, what it really does is it lets the person who's observing the story or reading the story see their own potential. Like, can you get 6-pack abs? Well, yeah, of course you can. Doesn't matter how overweight you are to start with. you do the exact right things, right? Which isn't really that, if you burn more calories than you consume and if you exercise every day, it's anybody's for the taking, right? Can you get a bunch of clients really quickly? Well, yeah. If you do the things that get clients really quickly, you probably will, right? So it's letting people see their potential is something to do when you're coaching, and it's an essential thing of marketing. Now, you see, I'm going to predict what you're about to say. Or maybe I'm not, I don't know. But here's a thought that occurs to me, maybe at the same moment it occurred to you. If seeing your potential takes a lot of stuff off your mind, then it's going to do an enormous amount for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love what you're saying, and there's a couple of things I hear in it. One of the things, it reminds me of a mindset shift I went through many years ago, where I would sit down to write a marketing page for an event or for something like that, and I found it really uncomfortable, and I felt kind of blocked and stuck. And I suddenly realized one day that without even thinking about it, where I'd been coming from was, how can I get people to book a place on this program or buy this product or whatever?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
And I suddenly saw that. I just had an insight. I was like, oh. And so I changed my approach, and I asked myself a different question. The first question was, with this event, for instance, what's the experience that I'd love people to have? What would I love to be able to give to people? How would I love to be able to serve people? And I'd spend some time just making a list of what the event I'd love to give them would be. And then I'd ask myself, how would I love to tell them about that? If I didn't have to give a moment's thought to getting, selling seats or anything like that, how would I love to tell them about it? And from that would come a story. And, it's the same when it comes to face-to-face selling or anything like that. If my focus is on how can I get this person to book on a program, I'm sunk before I even start, because my focus is on getting rather than giving. Whereas if I'm focused on how can I enjoy the hell out of this interaction and serve the hell out of this person and really make a difference in their life, it's a completely different feeling, and one that's much more aligned with what I'm about. And I really hear that in what you said. But the other thing I heard in what you said that I love is I think it's so easy for people to kind of think that how things have been for them is how it's going to be. Like if I have let's say I've been trying to get clients now for 6 months and it hasn't been working, so I'm just one of those people it doesn't work for. And revealing the potential is a way of pointing someone to, hey, actually, there's things that's possible for you that you may have lost touch with or may have lost sight of, and they're still possible. They're still possible despite what you may have been thinking until now. And that's so powerful, because we're all capable of so much more than we think we are. So I love what you're saying. Please continue.
Yeah. So other things that marketing does that we normally do in coaching sessions anyway, one of them is building rapport. And another one is uncovering challenges. Now, building rapport and uncovering challenges. Well, so one of the ways you might do that in marketing is building rapport. You might tell some of your own story if it's like a marketing piece that you're writing. So you might tell a little bit about yourself that makes you vulnerable. You might talk about how rubbish life was when you didn't have any coaching clients, right? And how painful it was and all that kind of stuff. You might tell, if it's true, then absolutely tell your story, right? But that's one way to build rapport when you're writing a marketing piece. When you're talking with someone, building rapport is just really deeply, genuinely connecting with them. Mm-hmm. And there's not really, and I don't know how this meshes with what you, with NLP stuff, but when I think of building rapport, I think of just having a really genuine connection with someone. So like you were saying, if I was writing a marketing piece, I would reveal some things about myself that, you know, maybe make me seem kind of vulnerable. But it would always come from a really real place, you know? And that kind of genuine connection that builds between me and the person, well, that happens just as easily in a coaching session as it would in a marketing piece. And they both end up being pretty much the same thing. They both end up being kind of similar. So,
well, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, something I was going to say is, because I deal with coaches, some of whom know the inside-out paradigm really well. I'm working with some people from that kind of background, and I'm working with some coaches who don't know the inside-out paradigm, but they know loads of cool, valuable coaching stuff, right? What I've noticed is that one of the things that's really useful and valuable to do is to uncover the challenges that your client is going through. Like, you do this during a coaching session just as default. Once I had a client who, you know, I was helping them with a marketing piece, and I was like, okay, so, you know, they want to lose weight. Well, what are all of the challenges that they face when they're trying to lose weight? What does the world look like to them? What's it like to be overweight? You know? And I was saying, well, maybe in the marketing piece we should say something about something about looking at a member of the opposite gender and then just feeling way too insecure to go over and talk to them. And my client was like, no. Couldn't possibly say anything like that on my marketing piece. That just wouldn't feel good at all, right? And I was like, okay, well, is it likely that that's what your client or potential client is going through? Have you ever had any clients who have those kinds of thoughts? I'm like, well, yeah, all the time. It's one of the biggest reasons they come in. And I was like, yeah, I figured, right? So wouldn't it make sense, if your marketing piece is designed to bring someone in, wouldn't it make sense that you connect with them where they are? Because that's where they are. It's like, if they're standing over there and you're standing over here, you can talk to them about how cool it is over here, and they'll be like, yeah, whatever. Or you can go over and stand where they are and take them by the hand and bring them over to where you are. And if you do it that way, because you went over and stood where they are, then all of a sudden, they know that you get it. They know that you get them. And then they're going to be a lot more willing to go where you want to take them.
Well, I really like that one there. And as I hear you, I think about the kind of face-to-face, or, you know, the sales corollary of this as well, and the coaching session corollary of it, which is about that connection developing. And it seems to me that one of the most powerful things when it comes to allowing that connection to develop is your ability to listen, is your ability to listen deeply to another person. And that seems to be one of the places that grounding plays a part in this. One of the ways it can really play out in marketing, I mean, if people say, well, I don't know where my potential clients are at the moment, I don't know what they experience as problems or challenges and that sort of thing, you can ask them and then listen, and they'll tell you.
Funny.
I know it sounds simple.
Yeah.
So
absolutely, yeah.
So
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so the another way in which, there are a lot of ways in which, to me, marketing, the moment I started thinking of marketing as just coaching people from a distance, it all started to fall into place. Yeah. So I might, in a marketing piece, which, by the way, could just be a newsletter, which is free, valuable content, or it could be an audio or a YouTube video, or it could be an opt-in page or a sales page or whatever, or it could be an actual coaching session. But in all of those situations, I would help people to see their potential. I'd build really deep rapport with them. I'd uncover what some of their challenges are. And then the fourth thing is I'd help them to take action. Now, I don't always know what the action is. And sometimes the action is nothing but just sit and absorb what you just read, because it was pretty deep, right? Often it's great to wind up an article or something with action, but the action that I'd encourage them to take, it's always going to be different in different contexts. And if it's a coaching session, they're probably going to know what the action is by the time the coaching session is done, even if they don't say what it is. And when they're reading an article that coaches them from a distance, by the time they're done with the article, they're going to think up a great action to take.
So take us through those four again, because the four, just
so if I was to do it,
if
I was to do them in a more logical order, it would be, the first one would be building rapport. Mm-hmm. Then I would get them to see their potential. Then I'd get them to uncover their challenges, the challenges that they're currently facing, the things that are really holding them back. And then I'd get them to take action. And if it's a real full-on sales page, because I do those too, or if it's, a webinar where I'm selling something or whatever, then the action at the end may well be, if it makes sense to you, you might want to buy the program. Okay? If that's going to help you, get a deeper understanding and solve the problem and whatever. Or it might be, hire me as your coach. Or it might be, listen to this audio another 12 times. I've done that in a few of my programs, right?
Well, that really makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And I know because you've been working with some of our clients to help them get results. And when people see it with that kind of clarity, it really makes it a lot easier for them. Because it's funny, I was talking to someone the other day, and I said, so just so I can understand, like if we look at the process of getting clients as, okay, having initial conversations, then making proposals, and then, getting a yes or a no, whereabouts in that are you, not clear on it? Whereabouts in the chain from initially getting someone's attention to inviting them to be a client, where is it not working out for you in that chain? And he was like, all of it. I'm like, got it. Okay, we need to zero in on that then. Because actually, I find a lot of people, and I don't know if you find this moment, a lot of people say, well, I just don't know where to start. So what do you say to people when they say they don't know where to start?
The first thought that popped into my head, without me even, was, well, if you did know where to start, what would be the first thing you'd do, right? But often, because I would coach them and I'd just get a lot more clarity on what exactly they mean. Because if they say all of it, they probably mean the first bit.
Yeah.
And if it's the first bit, it's probably, well, how to even start getting people into sessions in the first place. And it's funny because I was teaching a program to a bunch of coaches who were signed up to your program, right? And I was teaching them how to get introductory sessions. Because that seemed like a logical place to have a class. And I was like, well, there's certain things you've got to do to get introductory coaching sessions. And what's really funny is when I got a bunch of introductory coaching sessions myself, you see, inevitably, as I told people, well, these are the 5 things you've got to do to get loads of intro sessions, right? As I explained that, people asked some questions afterwards, and they were like, well, I don't have an email list, and I don't have this, and I don't have that, where would I go to speak, and stuff like that. Well, they're all perfectly logical questions. And what's weird is that I had all the same questions when I started, but none of it seemed like an issue. So it was just like, well, I don't have an email list. Okay, I'll go find someone with an email list and get them to send it out.
Mm.
Or, well, I don't have anyone to send this to. Well, who do I know? Oh, okay. Well, then so here's a great one. I started out, I was like, well, I don't have a niche. Well, so this was my thought process, because I actually ended up with a really, really cool, unique niche, which is Quran coaching, helping Western Muslims learn ancient Arabic so they can read the Quran. What's really funny is how that came about. which is, I was like, okay, well, I know I need to do these 5 things in order, like, to write in an email or in a speech in order to get people to have an intro session, right? So, okay, how do I get that in front of people? I don't have an email list. Okay, well, who do I know that has an email list? So I thought about a few of my friends, and I was like, well, you know, they're friends I had from university and stuff. I was like, well, you know, most of the people on their list are probably going to be Muslims. And I was like, okay. And then I thought of one in particular who had a pretty big email list, all of Western Muslims. And I was like, well, okay, so what would be the most valuable thing for them to learn? Like, what do they all have in common? What do they really want, all of them together, all the people on that list? I was like, well, they're all Muslims. Yeah, they all fast during Ramadan. They all pray. And I was like, well, there's probably some frustration for them around fasting during Ramadan and going to this 1.5 hour long prayer every single night during the whole month of Ramadan and not getting all that much out of it because they don't understand what the imam is reciting. And I was like, So I did everything in a completely counterintuitive order, which is, it was like, well, I have a friend who has an email list full of a certain type of person. What's going to be the most valuable thing for that type of person? Well, okay, what if I make my intro session, or what if I make my coaching about that? And then I had no idea if it would work, and neither did anyone else. And everybody else, when I was like, so instead of weight loss coaching and that, I'm going to try Quran coaching. And it was kind of like,
which is a unique niche.
Yeah, it was kind of like, okay. And I remember, right, because I told Christian about that in some session. I was like, so I have this idea, this thing called Quran coaching. And he's like, well, I have absolutely no idea if that's going to work. And the only way to know is for you to just go and try it out. So I did. And so that was, yeah.
Well, it's one of the things that I really like about you and your story is that you haven't just built a career teaching coaches how to get coaching clients. You've also built this very, very successful Quran coaching and product business, which is a totally unique, it's a unique niche and a unique approach. And it's again just an example of you putting what we're talking about into practice, which I really, really like. So you mentioned the single biggest mistake that coaches, consultants, trainers, and therapists make when it comes to explaining what they do and how to explain exactly what you do in a way that has people going, oh, I know loads of people that need your help, and sending you referrals. That sounds like something that a lot of people listening to this would love to hear about. So tell us about that. What's the big mistake?
Right. So the big mistake is, you know how I was saying that coaches love coaching? And people who know the inside-out paradigm love the inside-out paradigm? Well, the biggest mistake that coaches, consultants, trainers, therapists make when they're trying to get clients, or when they're trying to explain to people what they do, is thinking that, well, because I love it, and because it's so freaking cool, everyone else is going to love it, and they're also going to think it's freaking cool. And then they're just going to line up around the block to sign up to my sessions. So the big mistake is trying to actually explain what you do. So if I'm a coach, you see, here's one of the things I absolutely didn't do when I got a friend to send an email out to their email list. What I didn't do to a list of a few thousand Muslims is try to explain what coaching is. That's not one of the 5 things that you need to do to get an introductory coaching session, is explain coaching. It's not one of the 5 things. So, yeah, I don't know if this makes sense. So, I know that it does make sense, but I don't know if I'm explaining it in a way that makes sense.
Well, can I try putting it in a slightly different way?
Yeah.
See if this. Back when they used to have travel agents, I guess they still probably do, but there aren't many of them around. If you go into a travel agent, there are lots of pictures up on the wall of beautiful holiday destinations, sunny beaches, snowy ski resorts, people having a wonderful time in those wonderful destinations. there aren't any photographs of planes and buses and trains up on the walls. It's all photographs of destination, no photographs of how you get there. And so my rule of thumb for talking about that is talk to people about the destination, not the plane. Does that and for people who are listening, I think that coaching and what coaching is and how coaching works and why coaching is so great, that's actually the plane. And what your potential clients are interested in is the destination, which is their dreams, their desires, their goals.
Precisely, which is the results they get once they've worked with you, once they've done everything that you could possibly teach them or train them to do. The results is the destination, and that's what you need to talk about. So when somebody asks you what you do, I would stay well clear of I'm a coach, and what I do is I talk to people and ask them all these interesting questions, or I am a consultant of the inside-out nature of reality. That's usually, it could be a good conversation starter, but the conversation isn't going to go the way you want it to, right?
No.
Well, who knows? Maybe it will, right? But what people are really asking when they ask what you do, or a better way to think of it, is just who do you work with, what's their problem, and what results do they get when they're done working with you?
Mm.
So I work with Western Muslims who don't understand what the Quran says and don't understand what's being said in prayer because they don't know ancient Arabic. And by the time they're done working with me, they understand the vast majority, if not all, of the Quran in Arabic, and it completely transforms a daily experience for them. Now, you notice how I didn't use the word coach in all of that? Are you still, can you hear me? Okay. Jamie, I can't hear you right now. So either you've dropped off or I have. Hold on the line a moment.
The moderator has left the conference.
Hello?
Hi, Mamoon. My call dropped, so I'm back on now.
Oh, good.
So, Mamoon, the other thing I was curious about is you mentioned the easy strategy you use to get 80 people to request coaching sessions with you during your first month as a coach before you had an email list or even a website. Tell us about that.
Yeah.
You kind of started, but let's hear what that.
Yeah. The funny thing is, all of these things are really kind of related. And, before I get into that, because that is a strategy, and it's going to work really well, and I'm going to recommend it to everyone. Whether or not it works for everyone the same it worked for me, I don't know. But before I tell you about that, I want to tell you about a chat I had with someone the other day. See, the other day I was chatting with a client who's actually a friend of mine and a client of yours. Don't know if I should say her name, but she's
Probably
in the inner
not.
circle. Probably not. So she's in the inner circle, and we had a great conversation. And the thing is, she really understands the inside-out paradigm very, very well. And she's had a bit of trouble in her business lately. So we had a coaching session, and basically what she was saying is, well, in the past I tried X, Y, Z strategies, and I structured my coaching like ABC. And that worked really well. And that's not working that well anymore. And, instead of, I wanted my business to double, but business has gone down a little bit. And I don't know what's going on. And I was like, oh, okay. So, and it was just, a coaching session. So I was like, well, okay, why don't you structure it like, X, well, why don't you structure it like a DEF, and then do LMN, right? So structure like this and, have your pricing like that. And then see what happens. And she was like, okay, cool. And then, she was really happy with the session. She was like, wow, this is a great idea. I never looked at it that way. If I structure my coaching a little bit differently and if I try these other strategies. And you know what? I'll stop being so vague. I'll just be really specific. So the strategy she was using is people would go to her website and she was hoping that they would call her afterwards. And I was like, the only purpose of a website really is to build your email list. There may be other purposes, but if you want to quickly get clients, you basically want your website to help grow your email list. So I was like, so make these changes on your website and your email list will grow quicker. And then, then you can communicate with those people over time. She was like, great. And, the pricing, what she was doing before is she was doing like, session per session pricing. So if you want a coaching session with you, you'll pay a certain amount. And I was like, well, that's great, except that people have a really big reason to not do a coaching session with you. So they have to pay a certain amount every time they want a session. So I was like, well, why don't you just sign them up over a longer period of time and charge per month? And she's like, oh, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, here's why I tell you this, Jamie. She had a lot of really good grounding. Like, she got the inside-out paradigm. She knows the only thing that can really stop her is thought. So after the session, I went and made myself a cup of tea. And then I went to my desk to have another coaching session. And I got a message from her saying, hey, Moon, just signed up a X hundred quid a month client. Thanks for the session. And I was like, what? We spoke like, you know what I've done in the last few minutes is I've made a cup of tea. And you just got a new client. Now, the thing is, Jamie, that doesn't always happen with people. Like I've worked with a lot of people who don't have the same level of grounding. Like, they don't have the inner game that she has. They don't have the level of clarity that she has. And that just doesn't happen with them. Usually it's like, I can give them some strategies, then they'll try, it won't work out the same way, and then they'll come back. And then as the coaching gets deeper, I'll go into more, of exploring the nature of reality and that kind of thing. That's what normally happens. But I just thought it was really interesting that somebody who's really well-grounded and has understands the inside-out paradigm, it's like, I can give a strategy to somebody who isn't grounded, and that's all it will be, is a cool strategy to add to the 1,001 you can get from anywhere on the internet, right? Does that make any sense to you?
Oh, well, it makes a lot of sense, because this is what I see. There's a real trick of the mind, and the trick of the mind is when we see someone who's very successful, it looks to us like the thing that has made them successful is their strategies, the tactics they use, the approaches they take. And there's a way in which that's true, and there's a way in which it's not true, because actually the strategies that they've figured out, the things that they're implementing, the things that are working for them are all being powered by their grounding, their understanding of life, their willingness to take action, their security in themselves. So it's all being powered by that. And so sometimes we buy those programs or whatever, but because if we don't have the grounding, then it's more difficult to put them into practice. And so it gets added to the list of intellectual information rather than stuff like, I can tell you that what happened for the client you were just talking about, she had an insight about her business and how she could use those strategies. And boom, she was able to implement it right away. So, I mean, it's part of why I see the pairing of what you're doing and what I'm creating with the Clarity Practitioner programs being very, very strong. Because I think when people have the grounding and they have access to seeing how this stuff plays out in the domain of sales and marketing, it's a very powerful proposition.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah. So that's part of the, that's why I love teaching the sales and marketing part, is because I see someone like that who is such a great coach, nothing brings more joy to my heart than not just seeing them get results with the stuff that I teach. What brings real joy to me is my thinking in the moment. But what I see as being a really valuable thing is the impact she can now have on the world just through a really small, simple strategy. Like, it's like a double-edged sword, she would have got that strategy somewhere anyhow. But it's awesome that with like you have all the bases covered. You have all the bases covered. If you have, like, I can teach these strategies to people all day long, and it won't do anything for them if they're not grounded. And people can have a really, really deep level of grounding, but they'll never learn guitar unless they take a guitar lesson.
I'm reminded of I was speaking at a corporate event today. I was keynoting it, and one of the presenters, they had presenters from within the business before I went on, and he was putting up quotes from Sun Tzu, the person who wrote The Art of War.
Yes.
And I remember a quote from Sun Tzu where he said, "Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. But tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat." And the way I'd present that in what we're talking about is grounding without any idea of how that grounding plays out in a particular area like sales and marketing is the slowest way to building your business. But marketing tactics without grounding is the noise before defeat.
That is awesome.
So
awesome.
Speaking of that, I'm being patient. What is the easy strategy you use to get 80 people to request coaching?
Okay. All right. I will tell you, but there is a really...
Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. What's the other thing?
Well, I was going to say, it occurs to me, I mean, you've been on a spiritual path for many years. And so I'd suggest that that's one of the things that's contributed to your grounding, even before you started exploring the inside-out nature of life. Because I remember when you and I first got on the phone, it was almost a year ago, to talk about the possibility of you coming on a retreat. And this is what a 10,000-pound retreat. So this was a 1-hour phone call to explore whether you wanted to, make a significant investment and whether it was going to be fit for purpose for you. But I remember on that call, we instantly connected at a very, very deep level. And I think that, among other things, speaks to the grounding you already had. So I just wanted to say that. I think that's part of what your success has been built on as well.
Thank you. Yeah. Now, I have an inkling that there may be people who know about, because I'm guessing a lot of people on your list and maybe on this webinar have read your book, and they may know something about the inside-out nature of reality. I have an inkling that there's some people on the call who really love Inside Out and have enjoyed this conversation so far, but are still like, yeah, but come on, sales and marketing. Blah. So I'd like to share a really quick story before I tell you how I got tons of intro sessions really quickly. And it's so easy when you know how, right? Unless you don't have grounding, in which case it will be really difficult and completely useless to you. Okay? But I'd like to share a really quick story first, if that's okay with you.
For sure.
So it goes back to our retreat in Sitges, which is in Barcelona, which is where I am right now, actually. I'm in Barcelona, not Sitges. But we were hanging out with, do you remember we were with Chip Chipman?
Yeah.
So Chip Chipman is like a really good friend or was a really good friend of Sydney Banks, right? Who is the really super insightful guy who had a lot of insights about the nature of thought and the nature of reality and that type of thing. Well, what's really interesting is at one point, Chip told us a story about how Sydney Banks, he was sitting, so Chip was sitting on a beach and he was overlooking the horizon and this beautiful ocean in front of him. And Sydney Banks says, "So you want to be a teacher?" And before he had a chance to think, Chip goes, "Yes." And then Sydney Banks said something to the effect of, "It's the most wonderful life in the world the most wonderful life in the world. We get to go around the earth and find people in different depths of sleep and touch them on the shoulder and lovingly wake them up, lovingly shake them awake. And I don't know why, but when Chip first told me that, it touched me really deeply. And then a few months later, I had a really big insight about a lot of things, but especially to do with marketing, and probably because I work with coaches all the time. But I had just a new way of looking at it. See, going around the world and finding people in different depths of sleep, that's like going out and finding people, finding your target market, or finding people who need your help, which is most of humanity, by the way.
Mm.
And you can divide up humanity in any way you want, but really it's most of humanity. Going over to them and touching them on the shoulder, it's kind of like making first contact with them, or maybe inviting them to have a real conversation with you, like a coaching conversation with you. And lovingly shake them awake is what your actual coaching does. Now, a lot of coaches want to wake up all of humanity, but don't want to go and find people who are asleep, and then don't want to go over to them and touch them on the shoulder. And it's almost like they would not lovingly shake them awake because they're too... It's almost like some coaches wouldn't want to lovingly shake someone awake because they think that person is in too deep a state of sleep for them to wake them up. And what I mean by that specifically is there are some coaches who are like, well, I want to work with people who are, kind of inclined towards a more deeper understanding of life and that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, do you really want to only work with people who are already like half awake, who are already a little bit awake? Or do you really want to take the light to the darkness? So from a very methodological or, marketing theory point of view, I would say going and finding your target market is a lot easier than you think, because it's just going and finding the people around you who all want a result. Finding people in different depths of sleep really just means finding people who are absolutely convinced that a certain result is just what they need in order to feel okay or happy. And maybe they think that losing 30 kilograms or 50 pounds of weight is what they need in order to feel okay and happy. And that's okay, because they're asleep right now. You're meant to go over to people who are asleep right now. Touching them on the shoulder is inviting them and having your introductory conversation with them. And then lovingly shaking them awake is something that I highly recommend you do when you're actually working with them, when they've agreed that you're the person that's going to help them.
I really like that. And I remember that story. And I think, it's so easy to say, well, I love doing the coaching, but there's also the, finding the people who are, and meeting them where they are, which is what I'm hearing you speak to.
Precisely.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I love that you put it like that.
So
Mamoon, how did you get the 80 people?
All right. Here's how I did it, right? So with that, well, what I did is I went around the world. I found people in different depths of sleep. I touched them on the shoulder, and I woke them up. So here's how I did it, literally, is I found someone who had an email list with people who are absolutely convinced that they had to have a result in order to feel a certain way. Okay? And then I lovingly touched them on the shoulder by writing an email that made it sound really juicy, saying, hey, you can actually have that result that you believe you need. You can really have it. Because you can. You know, if you have with me as your coach, you can get the result, certainly. And then that person sent out the email, and I got the responses. And then I did the intro sessions. So I realized that I love approaching this from an almost spaced out level of consciousness, because I know that maybe made no sense to anyone. So let me bring it back to reality, right? So this is what I actually did. This is what I actually did. So I was absolutely determined to find somebody who already had an email list to send out an email that I knew would probably get results, because it did the things that an email needs to do in order to get people to email back saying, yes, I want a session. And to kind of bottom line it, the email has to have a great name, so that the session has to sound juicy. So the email had a great name. It was talking about the Quran breakthrough session. It could have been the Finally Thin Forever session. I once had a Find Mr. Right session. But the name of the session has to be really juicy. I mean, that's so much more juicy than a no obligation introductory conversation, which is what most people write on their website, right?
Well, I like that the juicy name of it spoke specifically to something that the people who you wanted to work with cared about.
Exactly. So that was the first thing, a really juicy email. So, and then equally importantly is I found someone, because I knew that, okay, I have maybe a couple of hundred people on my personal email list, I have a few hundred Facebook fans. So the first thing I did is I went out to everyone on my Facebook list who looked like they were popular. Literally, that's how I did it, right? And I'd go to them, I would say, hey, so I'm starting this whole coaching business. I'm going to help people, with this session. It's called the Quran Breakthrough Session. It's going to be really beneficial. But listen, I don't want to be like a needy friend, right? So if you don't want to play, no big deal. And if you do want to play, there's actually something really cool in it for you, which is I'd actually be willing to, if anybody does the session with me and then decides to hire me to be their coach, I'll be totally happy to give you like 50 quid per person that signs up, right? So I would love for you to send out this email for me, and there's a lot in it for you. And most people are like, oh, come on, Mamoon, stop being a prat. I'm not going to take 50 quid off you for each person that signs up, right? Most people are like that. But some of the people were my friends, and they actually ran really serious organizations where, they'll spend like a whole month preparing a one-day event, right? So they'll spend a whole month preparing a one-day event, and they'll just scrape by based on the revenue that they get from that one event. So one of my friends was this guy who had an email list of like 4,000 people, and that's exactly what he does. He put on events to do with, learning the Quran and stuff like that. So I got him to send out the email, and he was obviously, and I actually said, look, I know you wouldn't just do this as a favor as a friend, because you have a real business to run, you have an organization to run. But on a serious note, what if you got 50% of my first month's coaching fees, knowing that I would sign people up for 6 months or a year? And then he was like, well, how much would that work out? And at the time, it was like, I don't know, 50 quid or 100 quid or something like that. But he was like, yeah, okay, that sounds like a good deal. And neither of us had any idea whether it would work or not, right? I had no idea that it would work. But I kind of trusted in, I just had some level of trust that it would. And if it didn't, it would be no. The thing that gave me trust is if that person said yes or no to sending out the email for me, no big deal, because there's tons of mosques all around the country and all around the world that may or may not be willing to play. But eventually I would find one, right? And I have tons of friends who may or may not be willing to play, but eventually one would. So I had absolutely no neediness as to whether or not they agreed or not. But I was just like, hey, so here's the deal. Send out this email for me. If anybody signs up, you'll get X, Y, Z. And they were like, yeah, okay, cool. So if you don't have an email list, and I didn't have an email list or a website, but here's the other thing. The call to action of the email isn't go to the website. The call to action of the email is simply click reply and ask for a coaching session.
Yeah.
So you don't need a website. You don't need a website. Simple is best, man. Simple is best.
Nice.
Okay. And credit where it's due, right? These basic marketing ideas, like I mentioned at the beginning, they came from my now good friend Christian Michelson, who's a complete marketing genius, right? Who gave these simple ideas of, hey, do this client getting email thing, right? So awesome idea. So I just got my friend to send out the email, and he agreed to 50 quid per sign up, or whatever it was, 50% per sign up. And that was it. Now, I had no worries, because I would only pay out if the client signed up and stayed on after the first month. And it was just a really sweet deal. Now, here's the thing. If you're a business coach, there are tons of businesses. Open the Yellow Pages. Google, like, any kind of business. Google accountancy firms in Manchester, right? And you'll find a whole bunch of accountancy firms who probably need more clients. And if you're a business coach, that's your email list. You can probably find an association of people who have accountants on their... There's probably some accountancy association. And accountancy just is the first thing that popped out of my head because my brother and dad are accountants. But it just seems like if you've got a juicy named coaching session, that it just sounds really cool, like that a certain group of people would be interested in having. And if you can find somebody who has that type of person on an email list, then what's getting in the way? And the reason I love this is I don't have a website and I don't have an email list. They're like the people that I give strategies to who have no grounding, that's the first thing they say is, oh, but I don't have an email list. Or, oh, but I don't have a website. And I'm like, okay, so what?
I like it. One of the things I really like about it is that anyone listening to this call could get started on that right now. And like the client we were talking about that you coached the other day, she emailed me on Facebook right after she did as well and said, hey, I just signed up this client and da-da-da. Anyone listening to this call could take action on it and do this right now. But it does require action. It doesn't require you to be in the right state or have the right law of attraction, something or other, or anything like that. It just requires you to go and take some action and do it.
Yeah. And by the way, I have to say this, right? Because I know there's a lot of coaches on the line. The people you've been attracting up until now, before you started marketing a specific result, before you started talking about how your coaching gets one specific result, the people you've been attracting up until now don't tell you anything about who your next client is going to be or who may or may not sign up, right? The people I was attracting before I offered the Quran breakthrough session, guess what? They weren't really religious Muslims, believe it or not, right? But funnily enough, after I sent out an email saying I'm offering a Quran breakthrough session, funnily enough, I had a bunch of really religious Muslims signing up. Nothing to do with the law of attraction, I don't think.
So, Mamoon, that's all we've got time for tonight. Thank you so much. But I know that if people click on the button, we've got 9 free coaching sessions with you for people. And these are worth several £100s each. But, sorry, not free coaching sessions. They cost £97 each, but they're normally £300 and something each. So I encourage people to click on the button. If you're following on the webinar, there's a button just there on the side that says book your coaching session. And you can get a coaching session with them because we really want to support you in creating your practice.
Yeah, because the reason I do this, like, the coolest thing in the world to me is people that really are great coaches and have a deep understanding of the inside-out paradigm. Because for me, they're the ones who can really make a big impact in the world. They really can. My life has changed so much since you started coaching me, Jamie. Seriously. I've had insights and transformations personally that I would just love for everyone in the world to experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense to me that coaches who are grounded in the inside-out paradigm and who can help people get the inside-out paradigm, that those kinds of coaches actually having clients is probably a great way to get more people to understand this stuff. And to not just understand it intellectually by reading a book, and you have a great book, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
There was a really big difference between me reading your book and thinking, yeah, that's nice, to having that little conversation that I had with you before I came to Teachers and being like, oh, okay, I'm never going to see things again ever the same way as I did before. You know, there's a big difference between before we had that conversation, I was beating myself up all the time, and right afterwards when it was just like, yeah, I'm completely clear-headed now. Yeah. So that's why it would be an honor to work with anyone here who believes that they can help people. Thank you for entertaining my random ramblings.
It's been lovely to have you on the call.
All right, my pleasure.
Once again, if you'd like to get a coaching session with Mamoon, just click Get Your Coaching Session here. Thanks for your attention. Bye.
Bye.